Hi everyone, welcome to Extra Credit, and today is our third episode on the history of ancient Rome. Now, last time we saw that in 509 BC, the Romans got themselves a cool brand new government called a republic. And just like a teenager getting a cool brand new car, they wanted to take this thing out for a spin and see what it could do. And also, just like a teenager getting a cool brand new car, someone's gonna get hurt. So in 509 BC, the Roman Republic was just a small city on the kneecap of the Italian peninsula minding its own business. But by the time 275 BC rolls around, the Romans have managed to expand their power and take control of the entire thing. Now, first off, the reason why we call it the Italian peninsula right now and not just plain old Italy is because Italy as a country wouldn't exist for another 23.5 centuries. In 509 BC, what we now call Italy was basically just a patchwork of different people groups whose only unifying characteristics were a love of pizza and a 15-hour work week. Also, if you're in grade 8, it's high time you learned how to say the word peninsula because as I've learned from doing almost 10 years of reading assessments, most of you can't. Peninswayla? Peninsula? This is what happens when a whole generation of kids is raised without word-bird. So to take about 230 years of history and condense it into 40 seconds, the Roman conquest of the Italian peninsula really kicked off in about 396 BC when the Romans conquered a small town called Veii about 10 miles away from Rome. The next big dust-up was the so-called Latin War in 341 BC, in which the Romans defeated a bunch of neighboring people groups all allied together. That was followed by a half-century of warfare with a particularly ferocious group of enemies in the south called the Samnites. Then the Romans turned up north and conquered the Etruscans and some other groups, before finally heading south again to finish off some pesky Greeks who had landed at a place called Tarentum and had brought along giant mumikil that they borrowed from the Haradrim. Oh, they were just regular elephants? Yeah, that's probably why they lost. Now, when you gloss over something like that, it's a simple enough story to tell, but to really understand it, we have to look deeper and ask ourselves a couple of questions. How and why were the Romans able to expand so quickly and so effectively? Now, when it comes to the question of why they expanded, some people would say, well, the Romans were just super aggressive and militaristic and they wanted to take over the whole world. But that's way too simplistic, because after all, by the standards of their own day, the Romans were no more aggressive or warlike than anybody else. The worldview that most people shared at this time was that might was right. In other words, if you had more power than somebody else, it was your right to dominate them. And as brutal as that seems to us, this was the way that pretty much every ancient empire operated, from the Egyptians to the Athenians. Also, at this point, the Romans didn't have any kind of master plan for world domination. It wasn't like there was some shadowy group of senators meeting in a pub somewhere in Italy saying, first the peninsula, then the world. The fact is that the Italian wars we just glossed over weren't part of a master plan, but simply show us a common pattern of interaction between peoples in the ancient world. And that pattern goes something like this. When you come into contact with another people group, it can either lead to cooperation or to conflict. And when conflict happens, whether because of land or resources, people often end up reaching for sharp, pointy objects because that's usually the easiest way to settle things. Then the winners show their dominance by taking whatever land or resources the fight was all about in the first place, and things go back to some kind of normal. But what wasn't normal about the Roman expansion was how much land they were able to take over and how long they were able to hold on to it for. After all, they didn't just win a few fights, they ended up taking over the entire Italian peninsula and then dominating the whole Mediterranean Sea, which they just called Mare Nostrum, which literally means our sea. Arrogant, but true. So we really have to pay attention to this question of how it was exactly that the Romans were so much more effective at this whole conquering business than everybody else. Now, there are lots of possible explanations here, starting with the Roman army itself. When it comes to military organization, the Romans basically borrowed this idea from the Greeks called the phalanx, which is a bunch of guys in a big, tightly packed rectangle. What it lacks in creativity, it more than makes up for in brute strength. But the problem with the phalanx is that it's not super maneuverable, especially if you're being attacked by giant war elephants or even just regular-sized elephants. So the Romans solved this problem by breaking up the phalanx into smaller chunks that could be moved around more easily. They also mixed things up even further by putting their brand new green recruits in the very front ranks, where they could gain valuable battle experience like what it feels like to get stabbed in the face by an axe-wielding barbarian. Then the veterans were in the back ranks so that if things got really tough, they could come swooping in at the last minute to save everybody, just like the magic rescue eagles of Middle-earth. But in terms of their overall success at conquering, this isn't quite enough to explain it. First off, this whole military system that I just described for you didn't even exist when the Romans first started conquering, and it took time to develop. Also, things like superior tactics or discipline or weaponry just aren't enough to explain the kinds of successes that the Romans had and how they were able to maintain those successes for so long. Instead, the key reason for why the Romans were able to take over and hold on to the entire Italian peninsula is because of the way they treated the people they conquered. Because instead of just plundering them and then going back to normal, the Romans made a crucial change by declaring the conquered people their allies and then forcing those allies to serve in their military. It's kind of like when the big kid at school knocks you down and then says, "Hey, now that we're all good, you might as well give me your lunch money." Now, this may sound simple, but it was actually one of the most crucial developments in all of Roman history because what it gave them was a basically unlimited pool of manpower. And that was the key to warfare in pretty much all of world history up until the atomic bomb. Whoever can put more guys on the battlefield is probably going to win. See, there's this myth out there that the Romans were invincible because of their tactics or weapons or discipline, but it's just not true. The Romans lost battles all the time, and they even suffered some truly humiliating defeats in the course of their history. But although they lost a lot of battles, they almost never lost a war, and that's because they could just keep on throwing guys at the problem until it went away. And it was this pattern of absorbing conquered people into this network of allies and then making them serve in their military that created a self-sustaining cycle of success that helped the Romans dominate the entire Italian peninsula Lululemon. But another crucial factor is that the Romans didn't just conquer people and then lord it over them, they also handed out some serious perks. Some of their allies were given a package of rights which allowed them to move freely in Roman territory and also to marry Roman citizens. Whereas other allies were given the privilege of becoming full Roman citizens themselves, which enabled them to participate in the Republican government and vote in the elections. And best of all, wear a toga. See, even more than their record on the battlefield, the Romans' true victory was in the spread of Roman citizenship. Because by 275 BC, when their conquest of the entire Italian penitentiary was finally complete, people from all kinds of tribes and cities and languages could say they had one thing in common, and that was that they were Roman. And it was this collective sense of identity that bound the Republic together and eventually laid the foundation for it to become an empire stretching from Egypt to England and covering everything in between. But for now, the Romans were happy to sit back, relax, and enjoy the hard-won fruits of their new Italian pizzeria. Or however you say it. Hey everyone, once again, thanks so much for watching. It's been a great time making this series on Rome so far, and hopefully you're all enjoying it. Your challenge for this week is to figure out where does the phrase Pyrrhic victory come from and how does it relate to this week's episode. As always, keep safe, have fun, read a book, play outside, and we will see you next time.